Are you all looking for a new TV show to watch that has a ton of blood, young up-and-coming superheroes in college wanting to stop crime and or becoming famous, has a mystery in the woods, and oh yeah, did I mention that it has a ton of blood? Well, there's a new spin-off series that takes place in the same diabolical world as The Boys, as we are talking spoilers for the first 3 episodes of Gen V. Before we get into my thoughts, go ahead and share your thoughts on these first 3 episodes in the comments below. What has worked for you all? What hasn't worked? Do you have a standout moment or a character or a plot that has interested you the most? And more importantly, after you finish that 3rd episode, will you be turning in every single week to see how it plays out? Now, I'm going to be spending a little bit more time breaking down episode 1 as well as later on talking more about my favorite episode out of the 3, so there will be time codes that can be found in the description of this very video, as we got some diabolical episodes to break down. Full spoilers ahead. So how do you let your audience know that this show will not be holding back any punches and that it takes place in the same universe and also fits in the same tone as The Boys? Well, you start off with this insane scene that just shocked me, and I'm sure it shocked you all the first time you saw it, and it reminded me so much of one of the opening sequences of season 1 of The Boys involving Huey and his girlfriend, but this might be just as shocking as that scene. As we flash back to 8 years before the main story takes off, and we meet Marie, who's at the age of 12, and we see that her family's watching A-Train get introduced into the 7. Now, they seem to be a very loving family. Things seem to be very normal until young Marie feels like she's getting her first period. She goes upstairs, she checks on it, but unfortunately, things aren't normal as she doesn't know she has superpowers that allow her to bend and manipulate blood. Now, young Marie's mother comes in to check on her daughter, and unfortunately, that check-in end up getting her killed as the blood slits her throat. In comes Marie's dad, who's checking on his daughter, checking on his wife, who is now dead. Marie is just so upset, she yells, and the blood causing her to kill her own father. All while that's happening, young Marie's sister walks in, and she sees and thinks that her sister is now a monster. Let me know what you all thought of that insane opening scene. That's how you kick off a show if you ask me. But we learn later that Marie's parents gave her Compound V when she was a baby, but her powers didn't show up till she was 12. Now we see that Marie was ultimately sent to the Red River Institute, which, if you all remember for The Boys, was the group home that acts as an orphanage for supes, as Marie hasn't heard or seen her sister since that incident. Now, a quick rundown of our main students that we meet in this first episode. We already met and know Marie, who is the lead character of the first 3 episodes, who's been waiting for the opportunity to get into Godolkin University, which is a university/college where students go to learn to control and harness their powers more, and they use their powers to either be a crime fighter or becoming a movie/TV star. And of course, this is all provided by the wonderful people at VOT. Now, ultimately, Marie gets a full ride into God U, and she is determined to be the first black woman to be a member of the 7, but unfortunately, based on her situation, the alternative is that she will be sent to an adult facility where she'll be either locked up or worse. By the way, going back to the scene at the Red River with Marie, the kid that teleported to the desk next to her, is that Madeline's son? If you all remember at the end of season 1 of The Boys, when obviously Madeline was murdered by Homelander, it was said that her baby at the time was taken to the Red River Institute, and we know that the baby had teleportation powers. So again, timeline wise, that's probably like what, 4 or 5 years ago, and that kid looked to be like 6 or 7 or 8 years old. But let me know if you all think that that is Madeline's son in the comments below. As we're introduced to her roommate Emma, aka Little Cricket, who has her own YouTube channel, as they have the ability to be a half inside soup, and as we'll learn later, she does this by throwing up to get small and eating to get back to normal size. Now, I'll say this now, after episode 1 and 2, and honestly at the end of the 3rd episode, Emma is my favorite character. Now, obviously my mind goes to that soup that we met last season of The Boys that shares this similar power to shrinking, but seems to have a different means to controlling their powers. But as we'll learn about her, these abilities really adds to her character depth because of the attachment that she has to her mother and ultimately leading her to having this eating disorder. Now, we meet the rest of the main students in this first episode. We have top-rated hero Luke, who calls himself the Golden Boy. Now, Luke can set his body on fire as well as he can manipulate fire, but more importantly, he's got a spot on a 7 after they lost members such as Black Noir, Queen Maeve, and of course Starlight. We also have Kate, who is the girlfriend of Luke, and she has the ability of mind control. We have Jordan Lee, who is ranked number 2 behind Luke and is a gender shifter, and when they're switching over their gender, they have superhuman strength, energy blast, and durability. Now, Jordan is also under the mentorship of Brink, who is the famous professor at the university and the head of the crime fighting department as the chairman. And lastly, we have Andre, who is the son of Polarity, an ex-famous superhero, and has the ability of bending metal. Now, besides meeting new characters and seeing their abilities, the big mystery of this episode is, what is the forest and what happens when you go there? Now, there's also a mystery of this kid that escaped and taken down by Marie and Andre, which we get more of those answers in the next episode. Now, my biggest takeaways from this first episode was the social commentary on the pressures these characters face when it comes to having a social media presence and what that social media pressure does to these characters. Taking a look at Marie in this first episode, someone who we know isn't really plugged into this type of stuff. She doesn't even have a phone, but she is just so determined to be seen and known. Being a superstar and being a crime fighter will help her get her sister back and showing that she's not a monster, but instead she's a hero. But this social media pressure also applies to characters like Emma, who we know the plot really fits into her wanting to stand out, even if it means hurting herself and throwing up the shrink just to get likes on her YouTube channel. Now, you can also apply that to the character Luke, who has the pressures of literally being called the golden boy. Now, we end what I consider to be a really solid opener to this show. Marie's hanging out with the popular kids. We see that they go to the bar, and Andre's trying to repress this girl. He accidentally cuts the throat of someone in the crowd. They run off, but Marie stays, and she saves this girl's life. But this leads to her being a sacrifice because we see Brink telling her that they don't want to ruin the careers of the other students that ran off. She gets expelled. Meanwhile, while that's happening, the real big twist is we have Luke thinking that his little brother Sam, who was said to have taken his own life, is actually still alive, and this causes Luke to confronting and ultimately killing Brink, who he thinks is responsible for the disappearance of his little brother Sam. Now, talk about terrible timing. Marie sees all this taking place as Luke attempts to kill her, but is temporarily stopped by Jordan, who, by the way, Jordan has to know something, that she knows what's going on with Brink in the woods. That reveal is probably coming at a later episode. As Andre steps in, Luke's apologizing right before he kills himself in front of everyone in the campus. Now, I would assume Luke did that because he already knew that his career was just over and he was going to probably be locked up for life after killing Brink, but it's still a very shocking moment nonetheless. It's moments like this in this opening episode, and especially in this ending, that show me they have a similar tone and storytelling of subverting expectations from the audience. I'm sitting here thinking Luke and Brink are going to be in every single episode. They're going to be important characters, but they end up dying by the end of episode 1. Now that brings us into episode 2, which was titled First Day. Now in this episode, everyone's still dealing with the tragic events with Luke. Meanwhile, we have Marie and Andre are being branded by Vought as the guardians of Godolkin. We have Emma trusting the wrong friend, while the dean brings in Marie under her wing. Now Jordan can't contain her jealousy over Marie getting credit for fighting the golden boy, and Andre's suspicion grows as he starts to uncover the mystery with the forest. Now, breaking down some of the key moments of episode 2, we start off by seeing the dean talking to the CEO of Vought, which is Ashley, who's doing some damage control with the Luke situation. While they're doing that, they're trying to figure out a way to get Andre and Marie, as like I mentioned, the guardians of Godolkin, to be positioned as the leaders. So now Andre has replaced Luke as number 1. Meanwhile, Marie is the first freshman ever to be ranked in the top 10, and right now she's ranked number 8. We have Jordan, who was once number 2, is now brought down to number 5. Now within this opening scene, they bring up the woods and they don't want this to get out to the public. So right now the woods sound just as bad, if not worse, than when Compound V got brought out to the public. Now, one of the main themes that we get in episode 2 was when these people were putting the pressure on Andre and Marie to be number 1 and what that did to these characters. We have Andre, who we meet his dad, Polarity, played by Sean Patrick Thomas, who he is putting the pressure on his son to be better than him, and we get more of that in episode 3. But one of the things that really stood out to me with this second episode was just a little Easter egg setting up the other show, The Boys. For example, we had Homelander being on trial, but again, focusing on the characters here. Emma, we get more of what's going on with her. The smaller she gets is when she throws up more and more. And again, her wanting to be famous, her wanting to be seen by others was a big focus of this episode. And the dean is really kind of playing up to that Madeline character, trying to manipulate her, trying to get her on her wing, trying to control her narrative. Now we have Andre and Kate. They try to uncover what actually happened to Luke in this episode as they end up finding this video in Andre's father's statue. Now in this video, we see Luke talking about how he believed Brink was the one that ended up getting his brother killed or potentially disappearing, and that's what led him to killing him. We ultimately find out that the kid that was taken in episode 1 is Sam, who we know to be Luke's younger brother. While that's happening, Andre's figuring all that out with Kate. He doesn't show up to the media control. We have Marie, who takes advantage of this and is fed these lines, but we know earlier in the episode, even though her and Jordan didn't get off to a good start, Jordan wanted Marie to tell the truth of who actually stepped up, for she can obviously get back into the rankings, especially now that her mentor is dead, but Marie doesn't do that. And I don't really blame Marie, because she doesn't really know any of these people. Why should she trust them? So let me know how you all felt about the decision that Marie did. Was it good? Was it bad? It plays with the morality of these characters, and it plays within the gray areas, and not everything's black and white. Now, ultimately, at the end of the day, I wasn't the biggest fan of this episode. It's probably the weakest one out of the first 3. I didn't really care too much about uncovering this mystery with Luke and everything going on with that, because we really didn't spend that much time with Luke. So, and obviously Andre and his girlfriend look into it, it makes sense for those characters to do that, but we haven't, for me at least, we didn't establish that a relationship enough to make me care so much about what's going on. But the saving grace for me in this episode was the storyline going on with Emma, putting focus on fame and social media pressure. That was the thing that really kind of kept this episode from being like absolutely terrible for me. But I say all that to say, when we get to episode 3, it won me back, and I would say probably out of the 3, it's kind of a tight race between episode 1 and 3 being my favorite. But breaking down this third episode, which was titled #ThinkBrink, we have this gala going on for the fundraiser. While we have all of our heroes there, they have to face their biggest villains yet, which is their parents. Now, Kate and Andre become closer in this episode, literally closer, as they unravel the truth of Godolkin University. We have Marie apologizing to Emma, which, speaking of Emma, Andre sends her on the mission to look into what's going on with Sam. Now, some of the main plot points of this episode was starting off with seeing what's going on at the Sage Grove Center, which takes place 3 years before this main narrative. We get this really interesting flashback about the kids learning about the Compound V revelation and how Luke and his brother had a really good connection. Compound V obviously gave Luke these superpowers that he has control of, but unfortunately, what Sam gets, he kind of loses his mind with his powers. So we see him kind of calming down his brother, but ultimately we get this awesome, bloody, great scene where Sam punches this dude in the mouth and his hand is inside of his stomach and it comes out of his mouth. This is the stuff that we love from the boys. We of course see, and this I'm not gonna lie, and I'll talk about it later, Kate and Andre, they hook up, even though literally like a day ago Andre's best friend just died and her boyfriend died. But again, this is kind of that YA college themes that, again, I'll talk about it later. Not the biggest fan of that stuff, but thing that just really made this episode work for me, and honestly, it makes it possibly my favorite episode of 3. It's the parents being involved. We have Jordan's parents, Andre's dad, we have Emma's mom, and seeing Marie being mentored by the dean. It's seeing these older people influencing the younger generation, kind of trying to put them in positions of power, kind of in a way of like, they weren't able to do it, but we're going to use our kids to do it. But in doing so, they're ruining their kids' morality. And this was the episode to me that really highlighted the uniqueness of the Jordan character, that person being between a girl and a boy and how their parents perceive them and how they use their abilities. That stuff was so good to me in this episode. Emma and Marie and everything building up to that. Marie having her moments with the dean, again, the manipulation going on with that. Speaking of manipulation, Emma's mom appeared to be a nice person, but ultimately we find out that she was the reason why Emma ended up throwing up to using these abilities. So again, all that richness within the character stuff really worked for me. As we wrap up with Emma, who was instructed by Andre to just sneak in, get some details, some information on what's going on with the force, and maybe seeing if she can find Sam, which she ultimately does. Things start off a little bit rocky. Sam doesn't know if Emma was real, or if it was just in his head, but ultimately they get to know each other. And I don't know if you all got these vibes, if there was like a little romance going on between Sam and Emma in this scene, but ultimately there's a camera in his room, they sit in security, but we get an awesome way to close out, which is a bloody kill with Emma jumping to the guard's ear, ultimately killing him. But ultimately we need to see if Emma's going to find her way out of there, or if she's going to be caught and locked into the force just like Sam. So overall, episode 1 as well as episode 3 showed me a lot of promise for the spinoff. I think it has just enough flavor for the boys with the blood and the violence. It's not as compelling as a story as the boys for me, but what episode 3 did to me was it showed me that this can be a character-driven story on how fame is affecting these seemingly good people with special abilities. There's a lot of parallels going on with Starlight's mom applying the pressure on her. We see that same pressure being applied by the parents of Andre's dad, Emma's mom, Jordan's parents, and even having the dean being like the steel Stillwater character who was manipulating Homelander, we see the Dean is doing the same thing to Marie. Now, the stuff going on with the Forest, it's interesting, but it really hasn't hooked me because we've only seen the perspective of it affecting one character in Sam, and it feels like a combination of the Sage Grove and the Compound V secrets all over again, but we'll see where that goes. Let me know if you all find that mystery to be very compelling. Now, as a fan of The Boys, I love the cameos, right? We got A-Train, Ashley, the director of the Snyderverse ripoff, all the little Easter eggs with the statues of all the famous supes, the headlines talking about Homelander, which I think is definitely setting up what's going to happen in season 4. So all that stuff was really cool to see as a fan of this world. Now, I'll admit, kind of getting into my criticisms here, some of the line delivery, the dialogue, and the acting kind of comes off very freeform, CW-ish. Now, to be fair, I think some of that is on purpose. But speaking to the YA elements of it all, it's not my favorite stuff. Like when we have the relationship drama that's going to probably inevitably happen with this relationship between Andre and Kate. The bullying stuff is a little bit on the nose, but again, I haven't really bought into the emotional drama with Luke's death because we literally just met the character. But I will give the show this. I like how they sprinkle in those flashbacks showing him being like a caring brother. Him when he was alive, he seemed to be a pretty solid dude overall. So again, I'll take the good with the bad, the character-driven focus on the parents, the social media pressures, trying to be number one. That's the strongest, as well as obviously the world building being in the Boys universe. That stuff to me is the strongest stuff. It outweighs the negatives that I just mentioned. So ultimately, I'm on board to finish this spinoff and see where this story goes and see how crazy it gets and see how it's going to tie into the Boys season 4. And speaking of the Boys, I'm pretty confident that there will be some more major cameos, one of them probably being the one and only Homelander himself. Let me know your thoughts on these first 3 episodes. What worked, what didn't work, theories, thoughts, predictions, all of that in the comments below. But also, if you want me to cover this every single week after every episode, please show me by saying it in the comments, number one, but also by liking and sharing this video as well. Thanks again for watching today's breakdown of Gen V episodes 1, 2, and 3. Consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel. Check out my playlist of all of my coverage of everything that I covered on this channel for The Boys. Check out my most recent review on The Creator, and I'll catch you all on the next video.